had to get into a degree program at LSU that didn't involve any math and didn't involve really any right answers. You just got to create your own answers. Sharif, how are you at math?
I was in Alpha Theta. I was pretty good.
Oh, yeah? All right. Well, I'm done talking about math, then. Let's talk about the Saints. All right. I know that coming off the bye, it's a deal where they're expected to, over the next couple of weeks, get a ton of personnel back. Let's start at kicker. What's the story with signed kickers, Will Lutz returning, all that jazz?
I think he's still probably a game or two away from coming back. You got to give him some time to get ready. I know it's a position where you're just kicking, but that core injury isn't easy necessarily to come back from that quickly, and that's why Brian Johnson's still on the practice squad. Now, when you designate somebody to return from IR, they have that 21-day window to put them on the active roster. So I would say he is probably closer than Michael Thomas, obviously. So it's not this week, maybe next week against the Buccaneers. I just don't see it happening this week unless I'm stunned when we go to practice tomorrow and he's full on the participation sheet for the practice.
What's the latest on Michael Thomas?
That's still 2 weeks. I said it 3 weeks ago. I thought the game that he would be back for would be the Falcons on November 7th, I believe. And I think that would probably be the right amount of time for him to get back. Still needs a week or two to get ready, to get into game shape. The guy hasn't played in a game or practiced since January. So you can't just say, all right, well, he's off the IR and let's go play football now. It doesn't work like that. So I would say November 7th would be the game, so 2 more games.
Yeah, we were talking about this Saints getting this bye week and guys coming back. Which guys actually are going to be healthy coming off this bye week?
That's a wonderful question, Jeremy, because I think a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the Washington football team game, I said, hey, over the next month they have 9 guys that could come back. And realistically, maybe Marcus Davenport, Quan Alexander, Traquan Smith could be the 3 definites I think could come back. Could. I'm not saying definitely, but those are the 3 guys I would look at the closest. And, boy, do they ever need Marcus Davenport, because that defensive line has only 5 of the team's 8 sacks. They're bottom of the league in pressure, so they need him back in a hurry. And David Onyemata will be back next week for the Buccaneers game, because that will be 6-game suspension, would be fully served after this game against the Seahawks.
I almost asked a question, and then I thought better of it, and I'm going to ask it a different way. What do you make of Cam Jordan's play at this point in his career?
He always gets this question every time we ask him, hey, when are you going to get your first sack? When are you going to get your first sack? And he's a guy who likes to have fun and kid around, but you could tell, like, it's frustrating to him not to have the sack, the multi-sack games that he's used to having. And, yeah, he's up there in age. He's been around since 2011, and the production has fallen off. He's getting double-teamed. He's getting chipped, but I still think he says it's not no excuse. I should have bigger, better games, more, affecting the quarterback a little bit more. But he is worried if the other guys are eating and he's not, because he's getting the double teams, I think he'd be fine. But the issue is, guys, they're not really getting the pressure, and that's a concern to me. That's been the biggest concern, I think, this season so far through 5 games, is the lack of pressure and sacks this defensive line has not been able to put up so far.
Do you expect Traquan Smith to make a big impact when he comes back?
It'd be nice to have a guy who's a speedster other than Deontay Harris. Now, remember, he got hurt in the game against Washington. He hurt his hamstring. Now, that's another guy. Will he be, ready to go against Seattle? Will Taysom Hill be ready to go? So you better hope those 2 guys are ready to go if Traquan Smith isn't ready to go this week. They need somebody who can, spread it for Jameis Winston. They just need another receiver. I mean, they desperately need one, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got one before the deadline after the Buccaneers game. They just need someone. He has to be healthy. I mean, a lot of people expected big things from him this year, and then in training camp, boom, he suffers that hamstring injury, and it happened like on day 5 of training camp. He came back a few weeks later and just wasn't really healthy. He wasn't ready to go. They need him, though.
Sean Payton, one of the best play callers in the league. Obviously, bye week, a ton of time to make adjustments. Do you see him changing this Saints offense much heading into Seattle on October 25th?
That's the million-dollar question. I mean, we've seen a lot of ups and downs. I would say you're starting to see a little bit more ups with Jameis Winston. And it wasn't going to take 3 or 4 games. It might take half the season before Jameis and Sean start to click and get a little bit more comfortable. But you're starting to see that things are starting to come around. Once they can run the ball with Alvin Kamara like they did against Washington, the passing game opens up a little bit more. You saw that with, LSU against Florida. Once they were able to run TDP, it felt like Max could just throw a little bit more comfortable. I just think that they need just a little bit more time. I think with the bye week, it really is going to help Jameis Winston and Sean Payton. Sean is really good off the bye week over the last 5 seasons. So I think they'll be just fine. But this place they're going to, I know they don't have Russell Wilson, they don't have Chris Carson, and a little banged up in Seattle. But it's never easy to play in Seattle, especially at night when the weather is the way it always is in Seattle.
If Sean Payton had one thing he wanted to accomplish during the bye week, what do you think that would have been?
Well, find somebody who could kick the ball through the upright. No joke. I am not serious. I tell y'all this every time you ask me. They need to find a kicker, and maybe Brian Johnson is that guy until Will Lutz comes back. But 1 of 4 on field goals, missing a couple extra points against Washington, not having that reliable kicker against the Giants. Sean Payton after the game was like, "Hey, we got to make these. We have to make these eventually." He's right, and that might have kind of cost them the game against the Giants. They need somebody who could kick a field goal. If your one job is to kick in the NFL and you cannot make field goals between 35 and 50 yards, then I just don't know. I think that really bothers Sean Payton. Throughout his career, that's the one thing he has very little patience for, people who cannot make field goals or extra points. That really frustrates him to his core.
Let's go backwards a little bit. Something you were just talking about is with Jameis. When y'all speak with him, I know he's pretty candid and outspoken. What does he make of the way the offense has functioned up before the bye?
I think he is just doing, what he is capable of doing right now in Sean Payton's system. He said, "Hey, man, I'm still building trust with Sean Payton, and Sean Payton is still, trying to build trust with me." And that, I mean, how could you not say that whenever you have the soon-to-be Hall of Famer as your quarterback for 15 seasons? It's going to take some trust, and it's going to take some time. I think the one thing I would like to see with Jameis is him not think too much. Like, stop trying to think about Jameis Tampa days and not making mistakes. Just play football. I think maybe during this bye week, I think that's the one thing I bet Sean Payton probably tells him, "Hey, be Jameis Winston, but not Tampa. Just don't think about making mistakes." I think that's what turns through his head. He is thinking about those mistakes. But I think he's just learning from Sean. Man, this was going to be a process. If they can run the ball and win the game with Jameis throwing 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions on 30 passes, I think that's what he would like. But I told y'all before the season starts, he doesn't need to throw 5,000 yards. He just needs to throw for 35 to 3,700 yards, 30 touchdowns, and try to keep the turnovers down to maybe around 10 to 12. That's all you really need if you have Kamara. Now, they need another running back because Tony Jones Jr. is there, but I think he's going to start trending in an upward direction here after this bye week.
The Saints defense plagued with a ton of injuries, suspensions here and there. What guy do you think has kind of stepped up in the role and played big? I think for me, it's been Paulson Adebo.
Debo has done a good job. When they brought over Bradley Roby, everyone was like, "Man, well, I guess his spot is going to be gone whenever Roby comes over." But he had one bad game and quickly bounced back. He did a good job. And for me, it's a couple people. Of course, I'm going to always say this until he retires from football, and it's Demario Davis. He has been the glue that's held that defense together. And then it's Marshawn Lattimore for me. He has been fantastic with a cast on his hand. It's almost like, dude, if you're a baseball player and you're superstitious, do you take that cast off your hand? and because he's been very good with a cast. I know he wants it off, and I'm just joking because he wants to intercept passes, because I think he said there's a few passes that in these first 5 games he should have picked off. But I think those two guys have been really good, Demario and Marshawn. But I do think Paulson has excelled as a rookie, and that's really been big for them. And he's going to get another big test this week with DK Metcalf and Lockett on the outside. Those two guys are beasts, and I know it's Geno Smith. And trust me, I remember what happened in 2013 when Geno Smith on the Jets beat the Saints in the Meadowlands, and that was just not pretty.
All right, Sharief Ishaq joining us, WDSU. Sharief, since I just mentioned how good I am at math, let's play a little math game here for you. How many, just as a starter, how many wins do you think it takes to get to the playoffs? 10-7? Does that get you there?
I think this year it's going to take 10 wins.
Okay.
It will take a 10-7 campaign.
Your last 5, if you're the Saints, are very manageable with one significant caveat. But your last 5, you're at the Jets. That's very winnable. Then you go to the Bucs. That's going to be really tough. Then you play the Dolphins at home and the Panthers at home. Very, very winnable. Then you're at the Falcons. So your last 5 are very manageable. My question is, can they get through this gauntlet they're about to run at Seattle, home Tampa, then the Falcons, at Tennessee, at Philly, and then home Bills, home Cowboys? That's the issue, is can you get through the next 7 to get to the last 5?
Right. So I think if they get to the next 7, let's go realistically. Let's get to 4-3. So that puts them at what?
That would put him at 7
and 5.
and 5, and then you'd only have to go 3-2 at the end, and that's really, really manageable. So, I mean,
Right.
that would be difficult, but do you think they can do it?
I do think they can do it. I do think they can win in Seattle, a close game. And call me crazy, I think they can beat Tampa. Tampa Bay's secondary is devastated right now. They're so beat up in the secondary. I just don't know, like, that's if Jameis is really, like, clicking by the time they get to next week's game, they're going to be able to throw the ball. Now, that's one of the best run defenses in the NFL right now, so they're going to have to probably throw the ball a little bit more against Tampa Bay. And I would be, like, wanting to throw the ball a lot if that secondary's beat up. Don't be surprised if they can win the next 2 games. I'm always worried about, like, those games, like Atlanta, the Jets, Dolphins. You know, you're like, you should win those games. The Giants, and they didn't win those games. It's almost like, man, I feel like the Saints have one of those letdowns once a year, and I'm thinking maybe it was the Giants game.
Yeah.
But 11 wins, that's not out of the question right now for the Saints. A lot of people pick them to go 9-8 or 10-7 or 11-6.
All right, I got a question. I'll just flip the question for you. Who on this offense? I know we were talking about a bunch of the receivers having big camps. Who on the offense kind of stepped up this year that you really didn't expect to have that type of production from?
Well, it started off slow for our guy Marquez Callaway, me and Hunt's guy Marquez Callaway. But he's come on the last few weeks. I'm a little surprised with him. I mean, what were you going to expect? He was never going to put up Michael Thomas's numbers, but it's really hard to pick who's surprised me so far offensively. If we're just going pass catchers, I guess Deontay Harris. I mean, they've given him exactly what they needed, a guy who can get open down the field with an arm, and Jameis Winston. Now he's just got to stay healthy. I do like him. I do like what he can do. He stretches the field. He can run receiver screens, and he can even get open in intermediate routes. So, like, I like what he's done so far, but I'm going to stay on the Marquez train, man. And so I just think the Patriots game, this last game with the Hail Mary and another touchdown, he's had some key receptions over the last 2-3 weeks. So I think, you're going to see a little bit more Marquez. But remember, you're going to get Nick Vannett back, and Adam Troutman has to certainly get his game going. He's dropped some key passes and had some holdings that it's just not good for him right now. But it's hard to say because they don't have their full complement of players right now.
Thanks, Sharief. We appreciate some time.
Anything for you two guys.